Students Peterson's. Pen in hand. Ready to flow. Okay, good. That's the judge ring. Okay. Resolved that the United States federal government should close Guantanamo Bay. Now, my partner and I believe this resolution to be absolutely true, that the United States federal government should in fact close Guantanamo Bay. But we also have some more details about how we're going to close it and what we're going to do once we close it. So let's move on to the plan. Our agency enforcement are going to be the United States federal government. So let's move on to our mandates. Mandate 1. All detainees in Guantanamo Bay will be tried in a U.S. court of law. Mandate 2. Detainees found guilty will be dealt with according to U.S. law. Now, I'm going to expound on this just a little bit. Essentially, what we're going to say is we're going to see if whether they are really guilty or whether they're not guilty. And if they are found guilty, that moves us to our third justification, that these guilty detainees will be either sent to another prison and then either receive capital punishment depending on the various of the crime, or whether they'll be given a life sentence, and so on. And our fourth justification is that of the innocent detainees will be shipped back to the countries from which they came. And our fifth and final justification is simply that Gitmo will be closed. Our funding comes from the normal means. Let's move on to our justification 1 out of 2 justifications, and this justification is a political justification. The first point under this political justification is that of a loss of international credibility. Now I'd like to show a link here, is that countries, because of our actions in Guantanamo Bay, they have a negative view of us as another country. So now, for one instance, Great Britain opposes what we're doing in Guantanamo Bay, and I'm going to be touching on exactly what we're doing in my second justification. But what's the really impact of these other countries not really liking what we're doing? The impact is their loss of our international credibility. Now, when these countries, when they don't think very highly of us, it's going to kind of cut down on our relations, which can lead to a number of things. The U.S. doesn't get particularly what they want in a certain situation. There are just numerous things. So I'm just going to give kind of an analogy to do this. If everyone here in this debate round, Peter, Lydia, Hannah, and I, if I was doing something that all three of them opposed of, that would severely hurt our relations with each other. If they said, Drew, we really don't like you doing this thing, and I kept on doing it, that'd obviously not be good for our friendship and our relations. So let's move on to my second point under my first justification, is that of soft power. And this kind of links into my first justification. But the first is that link 1. Countries essentially want us to close Gitmo. There are numerous examples of this, but one example that comes to mind is Great Britain. They want us to close it. Now, the impact of this is if we close it under our plan, we gain some diplomatic relations, hence the gain of soft power. So in a certain situation, we can use pressure, this soft power, to essentially get what we want, rather than using sanctions or threatening the country. But we can persuade them because of a strong relationship through them by closing Guantanamo Bay. This leads me to my second justification, that of human rights violated. Now, I have 2 points under this justification as well. The first of which is that the detainees in Guantanamo Bay do not have the inalienable right to a trial. Under the United States Constitution, it says that any criminal must be given a trial by jury. All these detainees in Guantanamo Bay have no trial whatsoever. We simply say we have allegations against you, we think that you may be doing this crime, so therefore we're going to throw in Gitmo. That's it. They don't get a trial. They could be in there for years. They could be in there until their death. But this leads me to my second justification, that while detainees are in Guantanamo Bay, they're actually tortured. Now again, it's obviously unconstitutional, unethical, immoral, and so on, to torture a person, no matter what crime they may have committed. And we actually do this in Guantanamo Bay. We torture the detainees we have there to get information out of them, and so on, and yet they still remain in there. They're tortured. They could be tortured until their death for years and years and years and years. We are torturing them, and nor do they have a right to the trial. In fact, I think I can pull this figure out, but 33% of detainees in Guantanamo Bay are actually guilty. So that's another 67% of detainees actually in Guantanamo Bay that are not actually guilty. Yet they're being tortured, and they're being in there, they're being taken from their families, they're being taken from their countries, and they're being held in Cuba, in Guantanamo Bay, until possibly their death. So for these 2 justifications, the first one being political, which is essentially saying that other countries want us to close Guantanamo Bay. We're not doing it. That's what's hurting our relations. But if we do close Guantanamo Bay, we'll gain soft power over these countries. And for the second justification is that if human rights violated, for one, detainees not having the inalienable right to a trial, and two, they're actually being tortured while they're in Guantanamo Bay, I urge you to vote for the affirmative team. Thank you.
I just found out I don't have a watch, so.
There's no way I'm making. I have a watch and it's got a timer on it.
Can I borrow?
You may. It's not working. Probably not 30 minutes. That's my nap time.
I need like 2 forks.
Can I make faces at the video camera?
No.
Yes.
Hey, wait, these speeches are 6 minutes.
Unless you
Just
want
hit that button to stop it.
all the architecture to see that.
Can you
And
see
I'll
it?
be chatting with you tonight, like, what's your problem?
Okay. Art staff's ready.
Everybody ready?
No, go ahead.
Believe it or not, we are not going to argue about whether or not torture is good. We're going to do something way more fun. We're going to counter plan. We're going to talk about reasons to prefer, and then I might get into the justifications very, very narrowly, but that's mainly Peter's job because he's better at that. Okay, counter plan. The text of the counter plan is to reopen Guantanamo Bay. We're going to follow mandates 1, 2, and 3 as outlined by the affirmative team, namely that the criminals will be tried in the U.S. court of law. If they are guilty, they will be subject to the normal due process of law sentences that would happen in the United States. Mandate 3, that if they are innocent, they shall be released. We'd like to add an additional mandate, though, to our counter plan, which is the opposite of the 4th mandate of the affirmative team's plan, and that is to reopen Guantanamo Bay. Now, according to policy, U.S. policy that's already passed, it's going to be closed. It hasn't been closed yet, but it's essentially, for all practical purposes, going to be closed. So we're reversing that legislation and then reversing what the affirmative team's plan would be doing through this counter plan. Also, just to clarify, anti-torture legislations that exist in the status quo will remain under the counter plan. I'd like to move on to reasons to prefer. We have 3 main reasons to prefer. The first one is that of security. It's better to have these criminals, or these individuals, it's better to have them in Guantanamo Bay than to have them potentially released. If we just close Guantanamo Bay and then we don't have anywhere to put them, then they could potentially be released even if they are not innocent into the American public, or put in jails that are in America around where people live, and this puts the American people at risk. The second reason to prefer is that of overcrowding. Basically, if you close a prison, we don't need to close the prison itself. The prison itself is not the problem. It's what has happened in that prison in the past that is the problem. So if we, instead of closing Guantanamo Bay, if we actually just change how that prison operates and keep it open, then we can help to decrease problems of prison overcrowding. And that can also, the impact to prison crowding is that of riots, and eventually some criminals are released because there just isn't enough space for them in our prisons. If we close a prison that could be filled with criminals and just change the way that prison operates, it is no longer a problem, but it's actually going to be better for public safety in the long run. The third reason to prefer is that of human rights. The affirmative speaker outlined, obviously, that human rights are important and that we should be following them by protecting public safety. First of all, our counter plan does not harm the detainees at Guantanamo Bay, so we're not violating their human rights. We're not going to be torturing them through the counter plan. So the second justification does not apply to the counter plan. The second way is actually that we increase human rights, because what we're going to be doing is protecting public safety in addition to giving these detainees due process of law. And I'd like to briefly address the justifications. How much time do I have left?
3 minutes.
I'm going to slow down and I'm going to adjust the justifications. Justification 1, that of international relations. Now, basically, I have 2 responses to this. First of all, the affirmative team seems to be confusing the issue. The real issue is not that other countries oppose Guantanamo Bay, but that they oppose the torture that has happened at Guantanamo Bay. There is nothing inherently wrong with the existence of Guantanamo Bay. It's what we have done there that is wrong. It's what we have done there that other countries are protesting. There is going to be absolutely no problem under the counter plan if we keep Guantanamo Bay open, but then we very clearly reverse the trend of torture that has been happening at Guantanamo Bay. By reversing that, we're going to improve public safety, and we're not going to be risking loss of soft power and international relations being harmed. My second response is, again, that this does not apply to the counter plan. The second justification, that of human rights being violated. My first response is that torture is illegal right now for Guantanamo Bay. There's not torture that is happening there right now, and there will not be torturing happening there in the future, because it has happened in the past. That is a problem that we need to recognize, but the continuing existence of Guantanamo Bay does not mean the continuing existence of torture there. My second response is that the right to trial and other such rights under due process of law will be met through the counterplan. As we said, we're going to adopt the first 3 mandates of the Affirmative Team's plan, because they had great ideas there about protecting the rights to due process of law. We're just keeping Guantanamo Bay open instead of closing it. And not filling up my speech.